Leadership is something that kind of filters throughout my life all over the place. Not too recently, I did a coaching program, like sort of business, like personal coaching program. The Why Institute, it was called. So there's, everyone knows Simon Sinek and finding your why. So I did this little survey and questions, and it came back that my why is contribute. And I was like, well, what does that mean? What I get out of coaching is I like helping other people be successful one way or the other. I don't need pats on the back. I've never been that kind of guy. I like to see other people be successful, whether it's a young female athlete, whether it's somebody in business, just kind of a way to give back. Nobody gave me any of that advice along the way.
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 115. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Before we get into this, I'm asking people for a little a favor right now. I'm trying to get more exposure around the show. So if you like this episode or previous episodes, please share it with one person. That's kind of the big ask lately. So this week's guest, there's one guy that's going to be very confused about this, and it's his brother. Anyways, I have history with his brother, and this guy and I connected hockey and just like the world is small in Calgary. So please name and who you are.
Robin Finley. I'm a local Calgary guy here. Grew up playing hockey and other sports, lacrosse and such here in Calgary. Yeah, and we got so reconnected, like you said, through my brother, who you guys played on the same team together with. And I assume I'm here because I'm easier to get a hold of than he is.
Well, I'll tell you exactly why you're here, because your brother doesn't know how to use social.
There you go. Fair enough. That sounds about right. So he's a bit old school.
Yeah. So the full story is I played hockey with your brother Corey. My first year AAA Royals midget. Your brother was my locker. I sat beside him. So
nice.
I got educated. He was a year older than me, so he was my education. You imagine how good that went.
I can imagine what you learned.
So and obviously you and I've caught up online a lot. So I've been watching what you've been doing for over the years now. So this will be a cool conversation to actually hear the story, because I just know little pieces of it. And every time I have a guest on, you're chirping me about I met that guy over this and that. So I feel like this is going to go all over the place.
That's what a lot of people say. I mean, I only social media I really use is LinkedIn, but I have often people say you have a really strong network, and I have this sort of interesting network as downtown business guy in Calgary for 25 years. Kind of grew up most of my life here in Calgary. Went to school at U of C. And then again at State later on. But then, so I've got this sort of hockey connections, growing up playing some high level hockey. I played lacrosse till I was 38. So all those kind of friends and connections there. I'm still involved in lacrosse on the coaching side of things with female athletes, because my two youngest daughters are lacrosse players, Highland lacrosse players. And then I've also got this other network of people that I took a break from hockey after playing at university and got involved in Muay Thai kickboxing. So I had 10 low level, and I called them low level because they were like you and me, let's trade bombs kind of fights back in the day. So I was a late bloomer for Muay Thai, but then I got involved in the community, and I still hold a position with the National Sport Organization. So I've got these 3 or 4 different kind of networks. So when I do spit something out on social media, I seems to get a lot of hits just from different people.
For sure.
Yeah, which is interesting.
And you're, this is from the outside, but you're also very thoughtful with what you do online.
I try to be. I mean, there's, I have a political science degree is what I got playing at U of C, which is sort of not to downplay to anybody with political science degrees, but for me, it was really great because it fitted nice to hockey. You didn't have to go to class that often. Yeah. And I remember you had Steve Wheatcroft on a long time ago. So I played hockey with Weedy. He was there. Way. I was much younger. I was like a 17-year-old walk-on tryout. I saw more bench time than ice time, but got to play with some great players. And I remember Weedy saying C's get degrees. So I'm a perfect example of that. Even though I was always an honor student kind of going up. Later on, when I went back to school, the marks got a lot better. But there's some connections to that's for sure.
So funny. This will be a cool one. So let's take it back as far as you want to go. I'd love to know where you grew up, how your folks kind of played into all this, and just kind of your obviously athletics came in at an early age, so take it back as far as you want to go.
I'll go back to we moved to Calgary in 1978. So that was, I remember, because my first day of school was grade 2. I was 7, and it was Valentine's Day was my first day. So I remember getting some Valentines on the first day, some nice kids that welcomed me aboard. But Mom and Dad had packed up the family from Sherwood Park, was where we were living at the time. And I remember because we moved down here in the Winnebago. Dad had a Winnebago, and Mom and Dad had a Winnebago. We packed the 3 boys. So I was 7, Jason would have been 5, and Corey would have only been 2 or 3, I guess, at the time. So we all packed up, moved to Calgary. Mom and dad had an oil and gas consulting business, and my dad always wanted to be at home a little more. That was kind of one of his things. He worked in the field for a long time.
Yep.
That was part of the move to Calgary. There was more head offices here. When we were in Sherwood Park, I think he was going away doing, field work, and now he wanted to kind of make it a little more corporate-y so that he could put the guys to work in the field. So that was the first move to Calgary. Mom and dad built a house in Oak Ridge Estates on the south side of the reservoir, so that's where I grew up. I remember going to school. I couldn't go to school in the local neighborhood because the school was full.
Oh, yeah.
So I ended up taking the bus out to Chinook Park School, went there. So kind of grew up there, did end up back going to school in Oak Ridge eventually. One of the great things about living in Oak Ridge was at the time they had an arena. So there was, we'll get right into the sports as well,
totally,
right?
yeah.
So, I mean, I started playing hockey probably around 7 or 8. I was a terrible player. And back in the old days, sometimes maybe put the chubby kid or the kid who can't skate goes in net. Go figure. I ended up being pretty good at it. So by the time I was around 10, I was kind of specializing in goal. But I remember playing at the Oak Ridge Arena, and there's the 3 boys, right? So you could go, and the rink was 5 minutes from home. So no long commutes, none of this what happens now, right? And there'd be, Corey would be on the ice first, then sometimes back to back, and then be Corey, then Jason, then me, and then dad was playing old timers. He played into his 40s, right? So then there'd be like 3 Finley, so you could just look up the board and you could see not our names, but you could see the slots where we were slotting in. So
Crazy.
So grew up there in Oak Ridge, had a good life. I remember, playing on the streets, lots of kids around. Grew up with another local family, the Buchanans. They had 3 boys, the same as us, Gravistons, who probably Gravies, right? So 3 boys, all the same age. Lots of road hockey, lots of tennis at the rinks, lots of outdoor stuff, running around, doing crazy things and having fun. And went to high school here in Calgary at Henry Wisewood.
Okay. It's so funny because you're like that Oak Ridge community. So when I came up, when I was playing hockey with the Royals, there's this tight-knit crew that always came out of Oak Ridge. Yeah,
there was a lot.
There's just, I didn't realize there's that kind of, the Finley 3 boys, Gravistons, like I didn't realize there was that kind of lineage there.
Yeah, there was. And then others too that fitted, a couple boys here, a couple boys there. I mean, I'm sure there were girls around too, but I don't know. But
it's just always hockey.
It was pretty hockey focused. And again, like great community to grow up in because you had that rink that you got to play at, and they had an outdoor rink back. So when you weren't in the indoor rink, you're in the outdoor rink messing around, right? So
was it, did it just feel natural? Like, cause you're the oldest.
I am the oldest. Yeah.
So you kind of, there's nobody to like watch, but your family's just like into it. So they're like,
into the hockey thing. I'm not sure actually how it ever got started. I guess like my dad grew up, so dad's born in High River. I was born in High River. Interesting story too. We were both, I think the doctor who delivered my dad, his son delivered me. Which is crazy. And then dad grew up like small town farm guy in Blackie, working on the farm. He left home at a really young age, like 14, left home and he ended up living with one of his older sisters. But he played hockey growing up. So even way back then he did. So he kind of got us started, I guess. And, granted when we moved down to Calgary, I remember my mom tying my skates more than my dad tying my skates because dad was getting the business really up and rolling at that time. And it had been in business for a while. Like we'll get to that later. I'm running the family business, which celebrates 53 years in business this month, and I'm 53. So dad started the company just after I was born. So
crazy.
It was semi well established by the time that time happened. But so there was nothing really that drove us there other than mom and dad kind of gave us the chance to do it. And I guess just being a good Canadian kid, you should probably learn how to play hockey. So and then when we all ran with it, like we all played some pretty decent hockey. So it's fun.
So going to high school, where you were still playing, obviously.
Yeah, still playing. Yeah, so I played with the Royals all through. I walked on, I went and tried out and did all that good stuff and had a pretty good experience there. Played with some really great players and had some bad experiences too, where, there's always some politics and stuff involved where I can confidently say there's a team or two I should have made that I didn't. And those guys end up quitting years later. And here I am. I still stop pucks 5 days a week now. So I'm still sticking with it. But yeah, played hockey, and then didn't really do much of the school sports, but back in the old days, you used to play 2 sports, right? You do something else, whether it was soccer or baseball or whatever. And we got playing lacrosse in the spring. So again, the Graviston boys all played lacrosse. The Buchanan boys all played lacrosse. We had a coach. Everyone asked me, how'd you find lacrosse in Calgary back then? And it kind of found us. There was played soccer the 1 year. I wasn't a great soccer player by any stretch. And the guy we had as a coach was kind of a big old rough, tough guy. He was from Vancouver. He was a rugby player. I remember because he was just put together big traps and muscly guy back in the day. And he was a lacrosse guy too. So he said, I'm thinking of starting a lacrosse team next year. Do you guys want to play lacrosse? So we started a team and that was about, I was 7 or 8 years old. So we started a team and I played lacrosse probably even like a touch longer than I played hockey. So yeah, I started with it and just kind of stuck with it for a long time. And again, I was a goalie. Lacrosse, you definitely put the chubby kid in net at times. And yeah, I remember, I mean, that was old school lacrosse,
like chaos, right?
oh, like chaos and
Mean.
wooden sticks, mean. And I remember the coach telling me, he said, listen, okay, boys, and we're like 7 or 8 years old. And he's saying, okay, first shot of the game on the other team, you always shoot at the goalie's head. And we're like, what? Why do you do that? He goes, well, because then he'll be scared the rest of the game. I'm going, well, wait a minute. I'm the goalie. Is the other coach saying that too? Thankfully, the other coaches didn't know any old school lacrosse tricks, so I didn't get that treatment. But yeah, so I stuck with the goal in hockey and lacrosse till about 10 to 12. I started getting good at hockey around 10 to 12. And then they kind of said, you need to pick one or the other. And I had a sort of rough transition. The team that I was playing, I was pretty good lacrosse goalie too, and they didn't want me. It was hard to find kids that weren't scared of the ball, especially back then. There was no fancy masks, no Kevlar this or bulletproof that, and everything hurt. Every shot hurt. So I don't know if I was just crazy or what, but yeah, I ended up having to switch like communities because they weren't going to let me. We had some young coaches. They didn't want me to not play goal. So I'm like, listen, I'm gone if you don't. I ended up going somewhere else. And yeah, and I kept playing late into my 30s and still involved, giving back to the sport now. So
what do you touched on it, like not being afraid of the ball. I'm like, listen, I played a lot of hockey and you know, going out to block a shot at the point, you know, I'm like one eye open, kind of like not ready. I don't enjoy this. What do you think what is it? Goalies are wired differently, right?
I don't know. I mean, everyone says goalies are a little bit weird, but then I'd like to say that some people do say to me, "Hey, you're way too normal to be a goalie." So I don't know what that means.
Well, it's because you can string together a conversation.
There you go. Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Like I just like I said, nowadays I can understand kids will jump in net. They see it on TV. It's cool.
It's glamorous.
It's glamorous. You get the cool masks and the colorful pads and all that stuff. It's pretty sexy, right? And nothing hurts. Like everything is. I mean, I think I told you we were chatting before about new gear here recently, and they're asking me, "Do you want the bulletproof Kevlar where you don't feel anything?" I'm like, "No, I got it. I need to feel it so I know where it is."
No, I got it.
Yeah, it's way different. Way different. But I don't know. Like it was just natural, I guess. I just found a way to get in front of the puck and the ball. And they always used to say goalie need to be the best skater on the team. I was certainly not. I managed to move around that somehow. I had a really good coach when I was young. He was a mean son of a gun though. He got drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the summer he was supposed to play, he fell off the roof and broke his back. And I remember him coming on the ice with a cigarette and yelling at me, and because this was stand-up hockey back in the day, goalies, and you had to go up and down. But he said, if you're going to be a chubby little goalie, you better figure out how to get up and down fast. So he just drilled it into me, and I was lightning quick getting up and down. I learned it, and he was mean. I used to come home saying I hate him, but I remember like when my career kind of carried on, and I went further than some, and not as far as others, but some of that was part of the reason, right?
Do you I've had this conversation a few times, just how it's changed, especially around like in the sport world, specifically coaching, because you still coach, right?
Yeah.
And so the way coaching was back then, you had it like old school.
We had the old
tough.
school. Yeah.
I had it, from early 90s, mid 90s. So it was still pretty like,
oh yeah, it would be
still
for sure.
Straight lines. There was no like warm welcomes and soft hands.
No.
And now to today, right?
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, and I think there's still some of those hard-ass coaches around, and they don't get as much out of their players. And I think there's players that you can you'll get more out of them if you adjust your style, right? So I mean, a lot of coaches will just there's still players that you can bark at like that. Like I've had female players. Like I have 2 daughters that play. I have to coach them very differently. One is, she grew up doing some competitive gymnastics, and that's a hard sport. Oh my goodness, like they drill them hard, and she needs to be, coached a different way than my youngest daughter. And I've had some female players that are like great. They're off playing in the States and stuff, and I'm like that kid's going to be somebody's boss someday, right? Like so. That's the biggest thing I think, is that now coaches will look at trying to how to adjust. Now, granted, kids are different now too, depending on their upbringing and such, and how they've been, what they've had to work for in their lives and things like that. So it's a big adjustment. And then coaching female athletes is different too. Like there's something to that in the sense that with boys, they'll put in the effort first, then they'll get good at it, then they get accepted by their friends.
Yeah.
Girls are the other way around. They want to get accepted first, then they'll put in the effort, then they'll get good at it. There's always the girls who will, I always use the example, we throw all the hockey sticks in the middle, right? Yep. And the boys all jump in there and grab their sticks. Girls won't normally do that. They'll kind of all stand back and wait to see who goes first. There are some girls who will jump in and grab the stick and get started, but yeah, that's sort of one of the differences in coaching. Like the social atmosphere matters a lot, and they want to know why they're doing things. They can't just say just because the coach said so. It's like, we're doing this because of this, and this is how it fits in the game. And when you take the time to explain that, it makes all the difference. So yeah, I mean, I've been doing the female coaching thing for 15 years now. My girl's been playing, so they're 19 and 22. They've been playing for a long time, and we won a national championship this year. I meant to wear my big bougie ring, but I forgot. Right? I forgot to wear my ring, so
crazy.
Yeah, so they won a national title this year, and I like to think that I've got the secret sauce for coaching female athletes, especially in lacrosse. So it's super rewarding and fun. Something I spend a lot of time doing. So.
And do you feel like just all the coaching experiences you had growing up and all the different styles of coaches, and like, you know, high level coaches, like it just gave you more ideas of what you wanted to do with it?
Definitely. I think there's that side of it. I mean, you learn from coaching, you learn, you know, what to do and what not to do. So I was one of those guys that, you know, I'm not a talented or elite athlete by any stretch. I went way further than I probably should have, just based on like heart and desire. Like, you know, I'm the guy that even now I play beer league hockey, and guys like, you know, you don't really need to dive for that puck at lunchtime hockey. I'm like, well, yeah, I do. I'm here to keep the puck out. Like, that's no fun for anybody else if I'm not going all out all the time. And I'm a big believer in the saying that the way you do anything is the way you do everything. So that's I'm kind of all in all the time when it comes to things like that. But yeah, I mean, I learned a lot from coaches. I mean, it was different too back then. I mean, goalies didn't pay too much attention to the breakouts and the things like, you know, things like that. You didn't get to do that. But at the same time, where you're sitting, you kind of get to watch the whole game, whether it's sitting on the bench or whether it's sitting on the ice. You get to see everything from there. And I think that's why you see a lot of NHL analysts, coaches, general managers are goalies, because they do get to observe things differently. So yeah, I've learned some interesting things along the way. Like, I played for Willie Desjardins, who ended up in the NHL. You know, I played with him at UFC. So he was a great coach. He was, you know, I think you talk about coaches, I can immediately think of all the hard ass coaches. And Willie was by no means soft, but he was more understanding. He was probably on the cusp of that, getting to be, he was a little more soft-spoken guy. He could certainly bark if he needed to, but a little more understanding of the players and how to connect with them individually. So yeah, I think he was probably ahead of his time when it came to that.
Yeah, because I was,
yeah,
because it was so old school, but still like.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And, you know, there's a time and a place for that.
For sure. Yeah, you can have that card in your back pocket.
You shouldn't throw the garbage can every day.
So take me to high school. What's going on? Like school-wise, sport-wise, what's going on?
Yeah, mostly hockey and lacrosse. And school-wise, I was like, yeah, like I think we chatted a bit. I'm pretty introverted deep down. I love this kind of one-on-one thing, and people find a hard time thinking that I'm introverted, but because I can do a big presentation. But yeah, pretty quiet, stuck to myself. Used to hang out with Sean Graviston, who was a hockey goalie too. Same as me, pretty quiet guy. We spent a lot of time together. He went off, played at University of Alaska Anchorage, got drafted by the Hartford Whalers, and ended up in Chicago, is where he is now. Great guy. Anyway, yeah, I kept a pretty small friend group, pretty focused on my playing hockey. That was one of the big things that I was focused on. Like, I knew what I wanted to do, and not so much where I wanted to play, but I wanted to take it seriously and keep playing. And I was a really good student, did really well. I took like all the sciences, and you know, I was doing all the extra classes, no spares for me, and I was very academic. So I mean, obviously hit some parties and things like that, but my brothers tell me I'm pretty nerdy, so I mean, I can live with that.
Well, the young brother isn't nerdy.
No, he's not. Definitely not. I
don't know, Jason, but
he's off the chart social, and he's a lot of fun. That's for sure.
Do you? It's interesting you say that. How like this environment, the one-on-one thing, being an introvert, and I'm the exact same way. I think that's why you and I.
Yeah, I think so
connected like really quickly, because even in rooms, like in a dressing room, I'm not that. You know, I'm not the loud one. I'm listening to see who's the first person that annoys me is what I'm really doing. What do you think it is? How do you explain that, to be okay with silence, to be okay to be by yourself, but have the skill to speak in front of people as long as you're interested. And then this one-on-one stuff, everything just goes click.
Well, and I love this. Like, I do this, whether it's the podcast type thing or, individual meetings. Like I'll book some meetings for a day or two and I'll come home and I'll be pretty jazzed
Yep.
after having a bunch of meetings and, being on, I guess, for part of the day.
Yep.
But then at the same time, it drains my battery later on. Like if it's too much, it'll be a lot or I'll be kind of done at the end of the day. My dad was a pretty introverted, quiet guy. Like if he said something, it meant something, which mattered a lot, I think. I'm trying to think how it, like I think part of how I grew up, like I was the oldest.
Me too,
So
by the way.
yeah, so I think that makes a difference. Like I didn't have siblings to play with right away. Like I did pretty soon after. I mean, Jason's only a few years younger than me. And then my dad was away a fair bit when I was growing up too. So, it was mom and dad or mom and me and Jason. And then Corey came along later. So I think that was a bit of it. And I don't know. I mean, I think I check a lot of the boxes out of the typical birth order type things. Like I'm responsible in a lot of those things. So I'm not sure why. And then later on, like I'd say deadly shy probably up until my late teens. And somewhere along the line, I started working in a restaurant and people were like, what are you doing? Like you're pretty quiet. Like, how are you going to do in a restaurant? Anyway, worked in a restaurant, worked in Earl's restaurant or a few restaurants, worked at 3 different Earl's restaurants and and managing one actually at one point in time. But they had some great training and I just kind of learned. And I think it was one of my first sort of sales experience. And I kind of learned to interact with people and not that I didn't know I wasn't socially awkward. I just was just quiet.
Yeah.
And then, that sort of kind of sparked things. And then I became, ended up getting, I did engineering later on. I went back to school and after university, went and did a engineering diploma, went and did that type of work for a while. And then I started interacting with clients and I found that was the part I liked more than the engineering part. So then I kind of ended up landing in technical sales and going down that path. And then management and leadership is something that kind of filters throughout my life all over the place. Like, a few years ago, not too recently, I did a coaching program, like sort of business, like personal coaching program. It was about the Why Institute, it was called. So there's, everyone knows Simon Sinek and finding your why. So I did this little survey and questions and it came back that my why is contribute. And I was like, well, what does that mean? So there's videos and stuff about explaining it. And I find that what I get out of coaching is I like helping other people be successful one way or the other. So whether it's, I don't need pats on the back. I've never been that kind of guy. I like to see other people be successful, whether it's a young female athlete, whether it's somebody in business. I just met with a guy last week, a lacrosse player, 30-year-old lacrosse player. He does have business experience working, but looking maybe to crack into the oil patch. Spent time with him an hour and a half, telling some lacrosse stories. He had some great ones too. Played way higher lacrosse than I ever did. But just kind of a way to give back. Like I wish nobody gave me any of that advice along the way. And even my dad too, like he's very much old school kind of oil field cowboy kind of guy. A lot of it was figure it out on your own type thing. A little tiny bit of advice would have been,
yeah, for sure.
He did give bits of it. And one of my favorite sayings too was the older I get, the smarter my dad gets, which just means I didn't listen when he did tell me good stuff. So, that's, you go through that with your kids too, right? So
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find I find the introvert conversation always fascinating because it's like close to me. So it's always, it's fun to just dig into it and understand like what's behind it.
Yeah. And I'm like I've done a million personality tests. When you get into sales, you do a lot of that and you learn about how to identify other people's personality types, and then you can learn how to speak to them. So that's something that I learned pretty early on too, which has been successful. Like you can tell when you go to a guy's office and he's got his giant fish behind him or he's got pictures of his family or whatever, and you can quickly identify those sort of cues and then speak to that. So I always kind of thought about, well, why is this guy that way? And I'm kind of a thoughtful person, I like to think. So I look at him in that way. And then it's funny because like my wife is quite outgoing and extroverted. And then I've got my one daughter who I made all the family do personality tests. And the one daughter was like off the chart. Like I've seen a million of them. And and she's like way high up extroverted and which is crazy. And you can see it too in her personality, right? So it's
what I do find is like the Superman power to be an introvert is the ability to watch and listen.
Listening's key.
Like it's just because then when you walk into a room, your first move isn't just be loud and obnoxious.
Look at me.
Yeah, you're just like listening, watching, and you can kind of like and from growing up around sport, you can kind of figure out the hierarchy very quickly too.
Yeah. I think it's clever that you mentioned that because I think you learn that. And I think when I did some sales training along the way, I was fortunate to have really good sales training. I wasn't just like, here's your expense account, here's your suite at the box. That's how you rock your sales. It was, God gave you 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. Ask questions and listen and ask open-ended questions where you get lots to listen to, right? So, and before I got into confident enough to ask the questions, I just listened because I was shy. You know, I didn't want to talk anything. So I think that's, you know, one of you said the superpowers, and my wife and my daughters hate it is I don't want to say he's judging people, but kind of quickly assessing people.
Totally. Yeah.
And because you can assess people based on their behavior and how they act and how they speak and how they carry themselves and how they move and all those different things. And when you're a little more introverted, you're more likely to observe and listen, like you said, and you learn more from doing that. So if you're talking, you're not listening. So
it's funny. The second person that's been on the show that said 2 ears, one mouth. Yeah, my buddy Lee Buka.
Okay, yeah, I saw when you had him on.
Yeah, so he said the exact same thing, and I was like, huh, it's brilliant.
But some people can't do it.
I agree.
It's hard, right?
No, it's not. It's not just. It's not for everybody.
And ultimately, people like to talk about themselves too. Like, even if you're introverted, you still like to talk about yourself. You get the right person asking the right questions. I mean, I did a sales training course one time too, where a guy had, it was a great sales course. I was in Vancouver, and I was one of the only people from the oil and gas industry. It was pretty much all realtors at this course, and it was a huge course. And the guy who's teaching, he was an older guy, probably in his mid-60s, and just talked about, he gave the example of going on his first date. So he's old enough that, you know, when they were young, you know, it was very clear men and women were looking for a husband and a wife when they were like 19, 20, 21. So he was on a date, and he said, he came back and he had the best date ever his whole life. He said, this was amazing. He goes, I talked about this, I talked about that, I talked about this, I talked about that. And then he finally realized at the end that he didn't know anything about the woman that he was on the date with. And of course she was taking notes, and she assessed him, and they ended up getting married, and they're married for 50 years or probably still married. But he was like, she was the clever one because she was asking all the questions and learning everything and asking things that, you know, got his conversation going. And she knew everything she wanted to know. She was on a mission. She was looking for a husband and had some boxes to check. And lucky for him, he checked them, and he had the opportunity to check them. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, it was clever. So
university, take me back.
Yeah, so I finished. I went to school.
So through high school, you're playing AA, AAA. Like you're playing at the highest level possible, right? Your age group. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say I played AAA, but I didn't. So I made up to AA. So my last year of high school, I was still old enough to play AAA. Yep. So my first year of university, I was old enough to play AAA. Oh, you went young.
Yeah. So I was a January baby.
Oh, you are?
And I went to school early. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. January 21st. What day?
3rd.
No way. And my daughter's January 23rd too. So she was supposed to be born on
my
birthday.
But started early too.
Started early. Yeah.
Yeah. Me too.
So so I went early, and which was a good fit for me too, because I was pretty smart academically, like studious. And I was a big kid too. Like nobody knew. Like that's one of the risks sometimes with starting kids younger, especially boys. Yeah, for sure. Is that maybe you're smaller and you get picked on. But I was a big kid. Nobody knew. Yeah. Nobody knew that I was way younger than anybody else, right? So so I was in high school, graduated when I was 17. Playing hockey, and you know, I never did. That was my earlier comment about not making the AAA team. There was a AAA team that I for sure should have made, and I didn't. And that guy who got my spot, dad was a director, and he quit hockey like the year after. You know the routine, right? So, and I remember because I was pretty upset.
Well, that's those years, like to make the team and not make the team. Those are like very informative years. Like,
oh yeah,
I remember when I made the team my first year, when your brother was his second year, as a youngster playing, like you walk a little different.
Oh yeah,
as an introvert, walking a little more upright, still being quiet,
but swaggy.
It's just these subtle changes, right?
100%.
Because you've reached this point, and it's not. I don't know what it is. It's just it's an accomplishment at a young age.
And back then too. I mean, there wasn't as many teams around. Like you think there was 4 AAA teams in Calgary. That's it. And I mean, I'm sure hockey's grown and such, but now there's all these other options. There are these super leagues and all these places. Like, I mean, it's kind of watered down, you know, the talent pool. But there was one team out of your whole quadrant of the city, right? And I was Southwest, like you. Yep. Yeah, I didn't make that team, and I remember being really upset about it. Because, like I said, I felt I deserved to make it, and my dad. Classic dad move, right? He's like, you and your buddies are all going to make. I know I can swear on this, right? You and your buddies are all going to make the same amount of money playing hockey, and that's fuck all. So I was like, okay, thanks, Dad. But yeah, so I mean, he, you know, and before that, I'd had a few really good looks too. Like I was So I was pretty close to this tall when I was like 12 years old.
You're a
And I
monster.
remember, yeah, I was a big kid, and I wasn't always as thick as I am now, but yeah, like I got picked up at 12 years old by the Prince Albert Raiders, invited me to their main camp at 12 years old. They sent a bus ticket, and my mom's like, there's no chance like this that he's going to that camp. So that was like, see you later. And then, you know, I bounced around with a few other WHL teams, like even at that young age, because there was no age limits back then. It was way different.
Right.
I don't know when the age limits came in or what they were, but they were talking to me at that age because I was a big kid. And at 15, I went to Medicine Hat Tigers camp, and I went down there. I did really well. And they said, you know, what are the chances of you staying here and playing for the Tigers? You're probably just going to sit on the bench a bit this year. And I said, slim and none. And they're like, scratch my name off the list. So they invite the next guy in after, and he says, a guy I grew up playing against my whole life. And they invite him in next and say, hey, do you want to stick around here and keep the bench warm for us? And maybe you get to play the next year. So he signs up and he says yes. And they win the Memorial Cup.
Oh, wow.
And then they go off and they win the Memorial Cup again. That year, he's the starter. And then shortly after that, he gets drafted to the NHL. And then he plays his 20 years in the NHL and a couple Stanley Cups. And it was Chris Osgood.
No
So
way.
woulda, coulda, shoulda. You never know,
yeah.
right? But I didn't have a lot of guidance along the way. Like parents did put me in hockey.
Yep.
They didn't go to university, my mom and dad.
Yeah.
They didn't, obviously dad didn't play hockey at that level. I didn't really have any mentors around me. And I was pretty committed. And what I'd said was, chances are slim and none, I want a scholarship. So my hero was Ken Dryden. I wanted to go to school, all those things. But I wasn't taking the right steps to go to school to pursue anything in the States. Like I just didn't have a lot of guidance on that. So
It was choose your own adventure back then.
it was very much, yeah.
And like, yeah, and even like,
like that.
dude, you're saying the exact same things that I felt growing up too, because I grew up in almost the exact same environment. And it wasn't that my parents gave me every opportunity to do, like, if I was getting good at something, they just let me go.
Yeah, run
But
it.
there was no conversations around.
No.
Maybe think about this. Maybe
Yeah.
go down. This is probably a good way. They just like let me. And to their credit, this is why I can do what I do right now.
Yeah.
Because I don't ask for any. I'm not looking for answers from anybody.
Yep.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was a good thing. And yeah, but at the time, you know, so, you know, when I said I felt like I was this close to playing WHL on the team that won the whole thing. Right. And then I got cut from AAA the next year. Like and it does and doesn't, but you know, as the story carries on, playing goal is different at harder levels. Right. So, I mean, and then I went off to UFC at 17 years old. So I was a walk-on tryout. Walked on. All the guys at UFC had played not pro hockey, but played WHL at least. Some had played pro hockey. There was guys, and I was the youngest by a mile. Like I think the next closest was 22, 23. So 5 years difference. We'd go on the road to Manitoba. I couldn't go for a beer after the game. I was like 17, like it was 19 drinking age there. So I hung around with the team there. You know, again, my thing is I work hard. I'm going to fight on every puck. You know, I battle for every save until it's behind the line, and then you got to forget about it and start over.
Yep.
So that's how I practiced, and guys love practicing with me because I made them better. I think. And then so I hung around there till probably January of that first year. And then at some point they said, listen, you're pretty young. You're not going to play any games. And the UFC league is only 28 games. You play on weekends. They've got WHL goalies. And there was a bit of a revolving door of goalies for a while. Like some of the guys struggled with school and came out. And I ended up struggling with school too. Like I had academic scholarships. I got some of the sports scholarships for being there. But I was this close to getting the Dean's vacation the first time out because I didn't know how to study. Didn't know how to study at that level. And that's when I switched my major and ended up getting political science which is a whole other conversation. But
Do you think it was like being young? Like, was that a factor, or was it just a different way to learn that you just weren't ready to do?
Well, I think the way of learning I was quite comfortable with. Like, I'm a very good textbook learner. I can sit still and listen in class. I was good that way. I think you just needed to do more of the work. Like, so I was in a general studies type program, kind of with what I should have gone to was engineering. That's what I was good at, science and math, but it always kind of come pretty easy to me. And this was sort of calculus and a little more challenging stuff when you actually had to do the work. Like normally I would go to the class and I would listen in class. I would do I'd pay attention to and I would just make sense. I didn't go out and do any like practice ones. It was like trying to become a hockey player without ever going to practice. And that's what I tried to do with lacrosse, with the science part or the math part of it anyway. But it bit me, so I just didn't know. And then I was playing hockey too, which is also challenging. You know, you're on the ice. So we were doing morning sessions, afternoon sessions. It was a big commitment. Like anyone who thinks being a student athlete it's got its sexy moments, certainly in the States where they have big, gorgeous facilities, but it's tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough. Like you gotta, and nowadays these poor kids, like what it takes to get into school is really challenging
for sure.
And maintaining your marks. So yeah, so I hung around there till probably January of that year. And then finally Willie said, you need to go play some games. So they sent me back. So they sent me to tier 2. I was only 17. I just turning 18 in January there. So I went back. I still could have played AAA, but I started the higher level. So it was tier 2. I think it was I can't remember if it was the Canucks or the Royals where I went to first, because the Royals had a junior team at the time. So one of them wouldn't even let me on the ice. They said, listen, it's January. We got our team set. The other one, I went out there, and I'll be damned if I could stop a beach ball. Man, it was bad. Because Canadian university hockey is like one of the hidden gems that people don't know about.
So
they have no idea what the level is like. Yeah.
Studs.
Like guys are coming back. Like
Studs.
they played their full year, all their time in junior,
Yep.
or they played in Europe. Like we had guys who had played pro in Germany that were on this team, right? And so I had a hard time. And this is going back to what I mentioned earlier, is that when the level of play comes down, it can be very challenging for a goalie.
Timing's
So
off.
yeah, like the timing's off. Exactly. Like if you don't know where it's going, how am I supposed to know where it's going is one thing. That's one thing I run into now playing beer league hockey when guys with $400 sticks, but I play with some pretty good hockey players still, which is great. But yeah, so I had a terrible time. He let me go right away after one practice, and rightfully so. Yep. And then I went to the Royals AAA team. They did the same thing, gave me one and done. I got a release, got a tryout with the AAA Buffaloes. So I went over there. Things were going really well there. By the time I had adjusted, was over playing at the Arc, where they had their own dressing room and everything there. And which Malarchuk was it? Not the goalie. Which one's Clint is the goalie?
Clint is the goalie.
So Garth Malarchuk was the ex-cop, or was a cop at the time. Hard-ass coach, which I do okay under hard-asses. Got there, things were going great. We were set for a road trip, ready to leave for our first, and I was going to play on the road trip, get a game in. And the night before, I butterfly, guy lands on me this way, guy lands on me that way, and finished the practice. So I've left the ice once in 43 years of playing goal, and it was about 5 years ago when I tore a hamstring. But I finished the practice, went home the next day, or went to bed, went home, got up the next morning, and my leg was this big, and I fell as I stepped out of bed, so I couldn't play. Torn MCL, partially torn, so no surgery required. But anyway, I was off that team because of that. They went on to win the Air Canada Cup that year. Way. So yeah. Oh, and all those goalies got drafted to somewhere into the WHL or somewhere else, right? So they went on and won. And I know some guys that, a few guys went and played some pro and stuff after that. So another woulda, coulda, shoulda story. I was, close by. Then I came back, and I healed up for, it was probably 4 to 6 weeks or something. And I ended up dropping onto like a AA team for a little bit and just kind of filled in the rest of the year. And then I went back to the U of C the following year and kind of hung around there. Like I hung around there for most of my 5 years at school. So playing a handful of games, like no league games, some playoff games, and some good stories, like some pregame brawls and some of the old school stuff. Yeah, the Wild West, right? Played with some great players. Like, it was very cool.
That woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
When do you realize how, like, the lessons you really learned during those times? Because there's a time, and I got the same thing. So like, there's a window of time where you're like, fuck, this sucks. You're not like beating yourself up or like down on it, but you're struggling with it. Then you reach a time in your life when something switches, and whether you pick up something that you're just as good at, you kind of replace it, or you get to a point when you're 40 and you can look back and be like, you learn something. You learn something from all these woulda, coulda, shouldas. Have you? Well,
I probably wouldn't have used the woulda, coulda, shoulda phrase until kind of in the last recently. Like I don't think I ever. And after that, you have to forget about it. So I think I was pretty good at that. I think that was one of my strengths. Like, so I think I did let it go after that. Like I didn't, it just kind of, that's how it was, like everyone, it's a long shot, these, like, to make any of these things. Right. And, like I said, my dad said, you're not going to make any money doing this, which whatever, I got some school paid for. So I maybe went a little further than he thought. Yeah. Somewhere in that whole period too, I got mixed in with I got on the ice with some pro players. Like there was a time where, Calgary used to have a really high-end conditioning camp in Calgary, so they'd have a pro level.
Was the Malarchuk one?
Yeah, well, I was on the ice with Malarchuk. I can't remember who ran it. I want to say Wally Kozak or someone like that.
Out of Bauer?
It was at, it was in the Northeast. It was at Village Square when I did it. But yeah, so I did it so there was a pro division, there was a collegiate division and a WHL division. I was in the collegiate division, of course. And then that was the year, I can't remember what year it was. It was the year the Oilers were going to Russia for their training camp, and Grant Fuhr tested positive for banned substances. So one of the goalies in the pro camp was Mike Greenlay, who was their sort of third string, fourth string guy. So he got pulled up to go with them to Russia.
Yep.
And I got bumped up to the pro camp. So I was on the ice with Clint Malarchuk and Pat Conacher, like some of the old school hockey guys, right? And that's when I remember that I could play at this level because the pucks were moving. They were going where they were supposed to go.
You're reading it.
Yeah, and I was a intellectual kind of goalie, I guess. Like they always say, get your eyes to where the pass is going first. So I was good at that. So I was in the right position. I was a positional goalie. I wasn't the kind who can stand on the goal line and kick. So that one was, when I think about that one was tough because I think I could have played at that level. And I know I had the mental ability. I sometimes struggle with the fitness part of it, but I never, that never stopped me necessarily.
You could just flip it off? You could just
I feel like I just flipped it off. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think about those things now, but again, you never know what could have happened.
Yeah.
Sure, I could have made that team, but I could have done that knee injury when I was 16.
Yeah.
Or you never know what's going to happen. Like it's there's so much luck involved. And, there's even now, like I don't have, my kids don't play hockey. They all I asked them once and they all said no. I have 3 daughters and, I have an artist and a couple of lacrosse players. And they do lots of other things too. So they're interesting, well-rounded individuals.
Yeah,
I hear my friends and stuff talking about hockey and how, their kids, maybe he's not getting a chance because he didn't get drafted, but he's on the team, but somebody's stuck their neck out to draft a certain player. So that player gets a better look because everybody's job is on the line. Make okay livings. It's still that kind of sport, but it's growing. Like the professional box lacrosse is growing like crazy, and nobody's making big bucks, so that's different. But that's turned into a year-round sport too, where it used to be my off-season sport, right?
Exactly.
So training camp was to get in shape in September, right?
Totally.
You've been running shape maybe from playing lacrosse, but then it's skating shape. My skate stayed in the bag until maybe late August.
Yeah, 2 weeks to figure it out.
Yeah,
Week and a half maybe.
Exactly.
So what happens after university? This is where I'm really curious.
So I graduated university in 1993. So 30 plus years ago now. And poli-sci degree, had no idea what I was going to do. I actually did take a few other, looked at a few options, like where am I going? So I took some job. I did get a job in Japan, teach English, but I chickened out and I didn't go. So I took some Japanese courses, so that was kind of cool. And then one of my other, because I'm graduating with this poli-sci degree, right? Which is there's no
vague,
job.
right?
It's vague. There's no jobs in that. One of the things I wrote this comment on LinkedIn the other day. Thank God I went to university when they teach you how to think and not what to think. So that's one of the great benefits. For a long time, I didn't see any benefits of my degree other than, hey, I know a little bit about politics. It makes me interesting at parties. But it was all, pick an argument and defend your argument. They were all papers. And that's why I didn't have to go to class because it was mostly writing papers. So as long as you could defend your argument in a logical way, which is something I have from my science and math brain, the logic side of it, I was good at it. Where was I going with that? So so done school, tried looking at the teaching in Japan. The other plan was, okay, let's maybe give this pro hockey thing a try, right? So I started taking some German at school my last few semesters, thinking I would go over play hockey in Germany. So I had a few good leads there. And then back then, I think it's probably the same now in terms of number of imports they're allowed to bring, but maybe the numbers are different. And I had some leads and they were interested. And then sexy as LA Law on TV. He goes, you may or may not like it. I still think I probably would have been pretty good at it.
Yep.
Like I said, I'm pretty good at school, so it didn't really matter the path. And then I moved up to Edmonton, took a job managing an Earl's restaurant, which was kind of, I didn't really have the path, I guess, to get into an MBA program. So the thought was to go and get some business experience. And it was a pretty good experience. I mean, it was some crazy times working in a restaurant. I managed the Earl's Tin Palace in Edmonton on Jasper Avenue, which was the party one for the Oilers and stuff back in their heyday, right? So I kind of missed that time a little bit, but managing people, provides contract supervisors for the field. So guys who we don't build anything, we just oversee projects. So a company will hire them to oversee a pipeline or a facility project. So I kind of had some conversations with my dad about maybe going down that path. And he said, well, if you decide you want to go back to school and take something a little more applicable, because he wasn't big on the poli-sci degree, then maybe, I'll help you out with that.
So you had thoughts of it? Like
I had of the
family?
Of the family business,
the industry?
Yeah, the industry for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we all grew up in that industry. We had a good life that way. I mean, my mom and dad were great about, because there were times where, if you eat what you kill in that business, like there were times where, mom and dad were small town folks and they were not flashy. There was no fancy cars. I mean, it'd be a new truck was technology. And then I ended up transferring to Edmonton to Nate. So chasing a girl. Which happens. Went up there. So one of the things, so I lost a few, I was determined to be done my program in 2 years, which is what it was. So I lost a few courses in the transfer, but I went up there and I was, I guess, how old I would have been. So probably 95, 96, I was there. So a little bit older. So I got some special permission to have overlapping classes. So I had some classes, like a class that would run 9 till 11, and then I have another one that would run 10 till 12. And they would let me sign up both. So I remember running across campus. So I'd be missing like half an hour of each class or that type of thing. Yep. And I busted my ass. This is when I put in the science and math work, where I did the, treat it like a hockey game or like a hockey team practice and stuff. I remember spending time in the library just crushing out equations, and SATE and NATE were very much not theoretical, like U of C type engineering is that you learn the theories about how you're gonna prove this formula. Yep. There it was like, this is the formula to calculate laminar flow in a pipeline. Trust me, it works. Just use it. So that was very more practical. Anyway, so I went through all that program and I ended up graduating with an honors diploma in chemical engineering technology, which I always say was kind of what I should have taken in the first place. But
you got there.
Yeah. Came out, got a couple interesting jobs. I worked for an engineering company designing a custom flow measurement systems. So basically just a way of measuring fluids, oil and gas products. And then I had a really neat guy that I worked for, and he said he did a specialty, this custody transfer type systems. So he taught me all about their systems, and I'd go out, I'd meet with the client, find out what they needed. Then I'd go back, I would design it. Then I would, procure all the parts and pieces, and we would build it. And then we'd take it out to the field, commission it. And then I would do the follow-up and say, how did it all go and all that stuff. And I really enjoyed it. It was a long-standing engineering company, but I was engineering, this was mid to late 90s, and I was engineering things by hand, like not slide rules, but calculators and pencils. And I had a computer in my office, but I didn't do a lot. And I could see the writing on the wall that my choices were either stay here forever and probably have a good career, or if I want to do something else or move on and progress. And I like to learn. So I had to go somewhere else. So I quit. And what I found out, what I liked was these two other ends of the line. Like I liked the technical part, but I also liked the people part. Not in a super outgoing way, but like hey, this is what we're going to meet and talk about in business. So so I made a conscious effort to get into technical sales. Had like a couple of introductory jobs, and then I landed at a big software company where I was the only person in the entire company who was not an engineer. So everybody was engineers. I was an engineering technologist. So it was a well-known company started in Calgary called Hypertech is what they were called. So they built basically a modeling system for chemical processes and things like that. So it was high. Daughters. I have a stepdaughter who is my daughter, lived under my roof since she was 2. But my firstborn was right around that time. So my wife, it was chaos, total chaos, like terrifying, right? My wife, we bought a house at that time. So my wife had gone back to work as a teacher. So she kept us afloat for a few months. It only took a few months. And I landed a job with another oil and gas company as a sales and marketing manager out of the newspaper, if you can imagine. No way. They always talk about that. It's the job lottery, like newspapers, and now it's online. You never get any jobs, but I got one. So
that time period, like, how stressful? Like
so stressful. Like, it was crazy. I mean, the house was,
so what year was this ish?
2000. My daughter's born in 2002. So right around then. Yeah.
20.
So it's 22 years. She just turned 22. So 22 years ago. And we'd bought the house. And now I look at what I paid for that house. We ended up selling it for double what we paid for it years later. But I was stressed out.
But in the moment though.
In the moment I was like way over our head. First baby for me in the house, right? And all that comes with that. It was chaos. It was total chaos and unnerving, right? And then the energy industry is so up and down too, right? You just never know. Like, I remember one of my dad's famous sayings, which I've repeated a million times, is, if you haven't gone from steak sandwiches to bologna sandwiches and back again, you haven't been in the oil patch, right? Because there's those ups and downs, right? It's the guys that can kind of keep it smooth through those. So that was crazy, chaotic.
What do you do? Like, what do you, and I haven't like felt that, but what do you do in those times?
I'm trying to think back. Like, I don't remember. I'm a bit of a worrying type soul. So I probably was really worried, but I think I kept busy at it. Like, I treated it like a job. Looking for a job was like a job. And I think if I recall, it wasn't maybe not that time, but at other times where there were some downturns in the industry where I picked up other things just to kind of, make sure some money was coming in, that type of thing. So, it's stressful and hard. But, and part of Calgary is there's always lots of connections too. Like, you get to know a lot of people, and I knew it wasn't going to take too long to find time. But sometimes when the industry's down, it doesn't matter who you know or what you know, just nobody's bringing people on. So luckily I found that one. It was a great job too. I learned lots there and did really well. I had super low base salary. So I remember that one too, because it was a peanuts base salary, but they had really great commission structure. So they said, well, you can sell this and this one and this one. These are all the products. And this product, by the way, this one pays 25% commission. So I was like, that's that, which is a high commission, right? So I'm like, well, that's the one I'm going to sell. And I remember selling tons and tons of it and doing really well, and I made some great money back then doing that. And then eventually I had a come to Jesus meeting with my manager, because he's like, you're making too much money. And it wasn't crazy, stupid money, but I was making pretty good dough. And I was like, what do you mean making too much money? There's no such thing, right? So anyway, I ended up shortly after I quit the job, and my resume went out the next day. So kind of bounced around through a few other software companies, and eventually landed in the drilling world, and kind of climbed with the enzyme drilling. So I was working for a little coring rig company, and they got bought by Ensign, which is now the 3rd largest land-based drilling company in the world. So Murray Edwards company, pretty well known in the oil patch, and landed there and did some sales for them. I managed their coring rig division. Again, another downturn. That was probably 2007, 2008, big downturn. So they said, "Oh, we don't need a manager for this division anymore. I thought for sure I was the low man of the totem pole. I was down the road, but I wasn't. They moved me downtown to sell all the rigs, and they ended up gassing a couple of 50-year-old guys, which I'm scared to say that now. I'm a 50-year-old guy. So I was like, oh my gosh. So they got rid of a couple of the older boys at the time, and moved me in, and I wasn't warmly received by the staff there, or the management team, I guess, because I wasn't their guy. They didn't hire me. Somebody else kind of pushed me in there. But at the same time, they were quite happy to have me, because I was, with my sort of attention to detail and pretty well trained, I would say, in the sales world. I got all the corporate accounts. So I had like Shell, Nexen, Suncor, Imperial, BP, all of them at the same time. Whereas normally you would never give anyone more than 2 of those. Right. So they're the labor intensive, big, thick
Yep.
proposal type
Yeah, yeah.
companies, not the
red
they,
tape.
they don't go for hockey games. They don't go for lunches. Or if they do, they buy you lunch kind of thing because they're not allowed to. So I had all those and kind of climbed my way up the ladder there and had a little stumble there where I pouted and left when I got glossed over for a sales manager position. And then they brought me back later on. So they brought me back. I was 9 months gone and they said, we think you're the one that got away. And I came back 2 levels higher than I left, took a manager's position, had a fantastic mentor in my life, a guy named Jack Houston. And he taught me all the details, everything I need to know. He was a professional guy. He was great. And kind of moved through the business there, managing a bunch of different divisions for the company.
Yep.
I became the problem solver guy, which is something I like doing.
Yep.
So they kind of parachuted me into a few different divisions to see what was wrong, where the money was going, things like that. So uncovered some things and
Yep.
I think I was pretty valuable. I got pretty high up the ladder there. I was second from the top. So I reported to the executive vice president, reported to the president. I had done some presentations in front of Marie Edwards and things like that because I was on the cusp of becoming a vice president. So you have to do that. So that's, he's an interesting guy to meet and know. So yeah, scary smart, like Rain Man smart. So, and then 2018, so I'd been talking about the family business for many years with my mom and dad. So dad was, he passed in 2018 and he was 73 and he'd been fighting with leukemia, a slow moving leukemia for a long time and it had kind of progressed. And I'd been talking about the family business for years and my dad kind of held off for a long time. And but mom and dad would go away to the States and such during the winter for some, sun and R&R type thing. And I would kind of cover things for them when they were gone. And then, in the, I guess, late spring of 2018, like his one big client was, and dad, I think he was just waiting for the phone to stop ringing. Like he never really retired, right? So they had moved their office to their acreage. So he was in his backyard. Like I said, he was a farm boy. So he just like tootled around in his tractor and messed around in the yard. That's what he liked to do. So that wasn't too stressful of a life for him. And the phone rings, he'd put guys to work and the phone never did stop ringing. He always had one big client. And at that time they said, we're going to get really busy in the fall of 2018. Are you up for this? And my dad's like, well, I'm not because he was dying of cancer. And, but Robin might be. So summer went by, dad passed. On to have one of our best years ever that year, great year, and then the COVID years came, so that was terrible year. So I got my resume back out and polished up my resume. Maybe this wasn't the best move, right? And but prior to that, the role I'd left at Ensign, just before I'd left, before I joined the family business, they had put me back in the sales world. So I was with the sales world for a long time. Then I left the company when they glossed me over for a position, and they'd had 100 sales managers in between that time that sort of struggled, or some did well, some didn't. And then when I came back, or just before I left Ensign, they'd made me the director of sales for all the product lines, which they'd never done before. So there were 7 service lines, and clients were asking, why do we buy service from Ensign, this part of it, and it's not the same as when we buy here. So that was I was trying to unify it. And that was when I really, so the team it was a bit loosey-goosey sometimes, and I started just simple with the guys. This, again, it goes back to coaching and the athletes things. Like how do you work with people? And what I'd started was I didn't call them meetings, I called them coaching sessions, and everybody had a responsibility to book once a week. They had to book a 15-minute block with me. It was their responsibility to book with me. My calendar's up to date. You find a spot that's 15 minutes and you come and see me. And it was, what'd you do last week? What are you doing this week? What can I help you with? And I had a really positive response to that. Guys were really grateful for that. There was some of them had never been held accountable. So some guys ended up not working there after that. I did carry an axe with me from time to time. So it was just business, and those guys I'm still friendly with. Like, they were grateful for the opportunities and such, but that was kind of started to apply the coaching things that I've learned over the years through sports. So, and even, so that was the last role I left at Ensign. And I used to say I was there were certain parts of the company, I was the manager of hurt feelings for a little bit, because guys that used to be able to yell at their salesmen, now they couldn't because the salesman reported to me. So that was an adjustment for some people, but it was a really cool opportunity. But then the family business came along. And
was it always in your mind, like the family
went. And I couldn't engineer my way out of a wet paper bag probably now, right? But I understood a lot of it. And a lot of it was people. Like my dad was really, again, he was a pretty introverted guy, but he was really good with the people. And for him, most of the guys who work for us and work in the field are, they're guys from smaller towns. Yep. They've worked their way up the ladder. They're very hands-on type guys, really a lot of very smart guys. And my dad, he would make his rounds, make the phone calls and talk to them. And, he had guys that worked for him for 20, 25 years that, and they were all contract consultants. Like they could go anywhere. And we always had kind of a reputation for being, we paid better than everybody else. Dad always used to say, you get what you pay for, right? And the joke was something.
Always, but
Yeah.
like, to be,
And family free. I mean, I assume you mean tough spot with dad passing.
yeah, and just when your mom has to make that call
Yeah.
to like,
Yeah.
and you're in a good spot, right? Like,
And mom and dad are, married for 50 years
Yeah.
and business for 50 years. So they work closely together. That's tough. Coming into that, it's risky too. Like having your own, like my youngest brother, Corey, Corey, like he's an entrepreneur. He and I have some very different personality types and I have a ton of respect. Like I have never been that guy, like just shoot first, ask questions later and let's just do it. And he's that way. Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's really good for him to be like that. And I'm not that way. I'm a little more conservative. And so coming into an existing business is a better fit for me.
Yeah.
But even with dad, like, again, I'm a very like analytical, science minded, logical person. And I could see the writing on the wall with my dad. And he was also, like I said, rough old oil field cowboy. And he'd always said, I can't ride my horse and I can't do the things I want to do, I'll just punch my ticket and get out of here. And I think that's kind of what it was. And it was, no, he wasn't having much quality of life for the way he wanted. So it wasn't super surprising when he passed. Like I felt like I saw it coming for a period of time. So I was pretty okay with it. And I had a real good conversation with him before he went. And, but yeah, like when you said the family business, was it always kind of there? It was. Like that's kind of why I went back to school and did that. And this the opera. So again, dad wasn't a old school communicator. There wasn't a lot of that, pats on the backs and things like that. So a lot of talk about that kind of thing. And so it was always a little bit there. Yeah. And I just kind of thought, well, when's the time going to come? And you never know. And timing is what it is. I mean, maybe it would have been different if it happened earlier. Like I would have liked to have worked with him for a little bit more time. But then again, we probably would have butted heads on things too. So, I mean, some of the, he never had to do the big proposals. It was here's a rate sheet. And when the big proposals started coming, he started losing a lot of interest in jumping through their hoops. We're going to give you great people. We're going to do an awesome job. What more do you want?
Basic.
Yeah. What more do you want? Right. Yeah. So, the industry was kind of quietly nudging him out. Right. So
so to be running a family business now.
Yeah.
And so this is where I would have caught you, right? I would have caught you like
right in that time.
3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
So does it all make sense? Like, is it all the experiences that you've had over all these years, does it actually like line up to what we're doing right now?
Not all of them. A lot of them do. So there's some parts of my life that are not fulfilled by my business life. Like I learned a lot working at Ensign about how to run a business. I'm very much, I like to do things smarter, like be efficient. That's one of the things I like to do. So that's something we're kind of going through with the business now. We're very much a mom and pop organization. But we're pretty big mom and pop organization, right? So so I'm working on that kind of like, there's a bit of a lull right now in the industry. So I'm spending that time to optimize our processes and get us more efficient so that next time things ramp up again, that we can really take on a lot more and do things better. And I still, like I try and, even my mom's fully retired from the company, but she wasn't for a first little while. When guys would call the office, and I still try. It's getting hard now because I get a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls. I try to call back every single person. Every email I try to return, even if it's a, hey, thanks, I got your email. It's just something like that. And I've had more than a few really positive responses to that, where I've talked to the guys and they said, guys with your type of company, they never call us back. They only call us if they want something. And then I had one great call with a guy. He was working on a big project and he had a choice of which agency to use, a company like us. And he said, well, I'm calling everybody to chat with them and tell me your story, he says. So I told him about it, and it turns out he was born in High River too. And his doctor was the same doctor as my dad's doctor. So he was a little bit older than me. And that's what, even though I grew up in the city, I'm a city boy, but I still have the story, I guess, of my parents and the roots. And when you tell that story, that's what guys like. Like, they don't want to be a number, and I don't want to treat anybody like a number. Even if we get to a certain size, like, I still want to take phone calls and talk to those guys. So that part's good. The
Yeah.
So that's the one part I miss. Like, even though I am introverted, I do miss that little sort of one-on-one connection with the people, to help them solve their problems, which is what I like doing.
Yeah.
So,
Which is kind of it's an interesting segue into how you're involved in these different communities. And I feel that's very, I think it's like you started off talking about the four areas you're kind of in, where there's Muay Thai, lacrosse, hockey, and like there's, was it a conscious decision to keep going down these paths, or was it just like interest based?
it was, so it's funny. Like, I mean, in the hockey world, like, I still play hockey. I play lots of that. So that's one part. I have never really gotten involved in coaching or things like that, although that's starting to trickle in a little bit, and something I'm a little bit considering. The thing that's holding me back.
Because you have time?
Well, no, I don't have time, but it's because it's what fills my cup. It's like, I really enjoy it. Right.
Yeah.
And, I think one of the guys actually that I played with at UFC, he runs a goalie type program, and it's all about the mental part of the game too. And that's one of the things that I think I can really help with, because some guys have asked me to come help coach their goalies. And I'm like, well, listen, I played in a different era. I can do some of this stuff, but I can't teach all the technical aspects of it. So I haven't jumped too far back into that. I still play hockey. I'm active in the community in the sense that, oil and gas guys that I play hockey with. And then the rest of it sort of wasn't on purpose. Like, so the Muay Thai, so after playing hockey my whole life, I always had an interest in martial arts. I grew up in the blood sport and the Jackie Chan and the, Bruce Lee kind of era. I always wanted to do a martial art, but if you're playing high-end hockey and then high-end lacrosse all year round, like, there's no time for that. So as soon as I was finished playing hockey at university, I went out and I tried to play a little bit of beer league hockey, which was not a fit for me at the time, because I was, it was all about being mentally prepared and time. He had a gentleman named Keith Crawford, who's an ex-pro football player, super personable, big put together guy. He's involved in a few different, very businessy, involved in a few different communities now. And he was working with Mike. He was partnered, and I went in, and because Mike's quite a shy guy and hard to talk to sometimes. And Keith was a real salesman. Anyway, he went in and he did the sales pitch on me, and and their gym was at the time was on 11th Avenue. So it's not a health club. It was a gym. It was like going into Rocky's gym or Apollo Creed's gym. It was down the stairs, and you could smell it as you went down the stairs. There's pictures and belts and things on the wall, and it was old school. And I went in there, and I thought I was in shape from playing hockey. Well, guess what? There's no coasting in Muay Thai. So this was like, just like you imagine, light contact. So I signed up for this tournament, and I'd only been doing it for a few months. So I signed up for the novice division in kickboxing rules, which is kicks above and below the waist. Muay Thai rules, which is punch, kicks, and knees, but no elbows in this light contact. And then full contact, which is kicks above the waist, kind of the old school Chuck Norris kind of fighting. Didn't like that one so much. So I signed up for that in like the novice division, and then I signed up all three of those in the advanced division as well. And I won 5 of the 6 divisions. And I played hockey forever, and you get a nice trophy. Like I won the Mike Vernon goaltending award, like the first ever. It's still at Stupa Park. I'm the first winner.
way.
It's there. First name on there.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I won that. Now back then, so you got a little trophy like this. Well, I win this kickboxing tournament, and they're all this big. So I brought home like 6 of these gigantic, 5 firsts and a second. Brought home all of these, and then Mike Miles was at the tournament. Again, he's a pretty shy guy, and he's like, "If you ever want to try this for real, let me know." I'm like, okay. So I kept just kind of training for fun. And then you had to train I ended up training out of his Northwest gym, which was a little more in the community, more, cardio kickboxing classes and stuff. They're not quite as serious. But if you want to train, you have to go to the fighters gym, which is downtown. And fighters class, by the way, is 4 till 7. It's a 3-hour class. And again, no coasting. 3 times a week. Anyway, so I went down there and started training there. So I, at the time my wife and I were, I can't remember, pregnant. She was pregnant, or we were just having a baby. I think I had my first fight around that time. But so she was super supportive. My wife Annie is like always, she's amazing and supportive of all these crazy things I like to do. Like she knows that these are the things that keep me from being crazy, So always supportive of those things. And so I went off and started training and had my first fight in 2001, I think it was 2001 or 2002. So just before my daughter was born, I think. So it was short and sweet. It was at Mike Miles' gym in Northwest, and minute and a half. I was super fit for me, and smashed this guy pretty fast. I didn't even get hit. It was a bit of a letdown. I was kind of hoping to
see what you got.
Like fight for a while, right?
Yeah.
And so that happened, and I'd have 2 or 3 fights, and then I'd take a couple of years off, gain 25 pounds with my wife. I have a baby. I was old. I was in my late 20s, and most of the guys are like 18, 19, 17. Like it's a young guy sport, right? Yep. So I kind of kept at that over a span of like 10 years. I guess I had 10 fights over 10 years with like kind of gaps in between. And then my last fight was at 38. So I had that fight, and I fought. So I lost that one. I'd been off for a couple of years. I did all right, but the kid I fought was, he was a kid. He was 18. I was older than his coach, and his coach came out to me and said, "Hey, good for you," and getting in there, old guy, and things like that. But these guys have nothing but time. So I remember training, like Mike said, these are the things you have to do. You gotta do your road work, you gotta do your pad work, you gotta do your sparring. And I'm like, and you gotta be at fighters class. I was like, okay, well, I didn't hear being a dad, helping with dinner. I didn't hear any of those things. And I take being a dad and a husband are my 2 number 1 jobs. Right. So anyway, he was really understanding of me, and I end up, doing the fighters classes, and there's pictures of me pushing one of the kids in a stroller, doing runs at 6 a.m, all bundled up. And then I'd go in and spar and stuff at lunchtime while I'd come in a suit. Thankfully, I didn't get too many black eyes in sparring. I guess I was lucky. I went to work okay. Although they usually make for good stories. Right. So I did that for a while, but how I got involved beyond the fighting part of it was I used to like going to the fights because they were entertaining. They'd be like, I was, you can go to, everyone likes hockey game. Like who's this kid now? Rempe, everyone's watching, Rempe, right? Yeah. This is bringing some life to the game. Go figure. People like that stuff, right? So I used to say, you can go to you go to the hockey game and hope that a fight breaks out, or you can come watch a Muay Thai fight card and there'll be fights nonstop the whole time, right? So one of the fight cards I wanted to go to got shut down in Calgary over some politics and bullshit. And most of the fighters are young guys, maybe not educated yet. And so I kind of asked questions like, why was this shut down? And what's going on here? And they said, oh, it's this bylaw and this. Anyway, so I got involved. So I ended up taking a position with the local, which was the Calgary Amateur Kickboxing and Muay Thai Association. So I took a sort of basic position with them and kind of got involved. It was just a little organization for all the fighters. And I got involved there, and that kind of progressed to becoming the president of Muay Thai Canada, which is the national sports organization, which is Muay Thai is a fringy kind of sport. Like it's does have Olympic recognition now, but it's very, it's very disjointed, and there's challenges with it. I mean, North America competes very differently than other parts of the world. Like here, if you get paid, you're a professional. Other parts of the world, all that matters is, are you guys the same skill level when you match up? So I got involved with that, and then it used to be the Calgary Boxing and Wrestling Commission. So most of what they used to see was Stampede Wrestling and the odd boxing fight that would come through town. And eventually they rewrote the bylaw, which I was part of. I was on a committee that helped rewrite the bylaw, and it's now the Calgary Combative Sports Commission. So I got involved from that level, which was fun and challenging and frustrating at times too. So, and I stayed involved that way. And then I went to a few world championships, not as an athlete, but as a administrator. So I stayed kind of what the attraction, why people liked having me involved was I didn't own a gym. Everybody was making money from this. Like they owned a gym, but they're promoting fights and they're trying to pick Team Canada and all these things. And I had no horse in the race other than just wanted to see the sport kind of grow and benefit. So that's how I got involved and stayed involved. I'm kind of trying to wind down my involvement now. My enthusiasm for it is sort of is fading. So they're asking me to stay in some way, some capacity. So I'm still kind of in there now, but I'm going through that right now.
It's years though, right? Like,
yeah, I've been the president of that association since 2006. Yeah. So it's been a long time. And there's times where it's been peaked and lots of things are going on and things are happening. There's the heyday of it. Yeah. And then there's times like COVID where there's nothing going on or, things like that. So it's been interesting. That's for sure. So that kind of just happened. Like I said, I wanted to go in and get in shape, and then I ended up fighting, and then I ended up liking the fights. And, I kind of not promoted, but I worked with Mike Miles and Trevor Smandich here in Calgary. Like I've been involved in promoting 40 some plus fight cards. So I was behind, again, I'm not a pat on the back kind of guy. So I was behind the scenes guy. They were doing Olympic recognition. It'll probably be a demo sport at some point in time, but like I hear from the people in Thailand that are, the ones driving it forward and things like that. So again, it's time for someone else to step in and have the energy for that. And I've had some good people along the way that really were energetic about it. And that's, you need to cycle through those things. Sure. I'm getting long in the tooth for that one. For sure.
It's a shift.
Yeah. And then the lacrosse side of things. So, I stayed playing until my late 30s, like right around 38, I played. So all this kind of lines up. So I've been playing lacrosse and I'm fighting, and I did spend a fair amount of time with my gloves off in lacrosse too. So I was a player in lacrosse. And I used to, like in my young days, I was never fast, but I was big, and I could always hang on to the ball. I had a good stick. My stick used to sit beside me, beside my bed. I'd get up, pick it up in the morning. I always had it. I'd be, bouncing the ball down the street. And so I had pretty good stick skills, I think, because if you can't run fast, you better be able to hold on to the ball. Started fighting a little bit, defending guys. And these are the guerrilla days of lacrosse. Like when I started playing senior lacrosse when I was 17. So now senior doesn't start till 22. That's because there was no junior when I played. And lots of guys tons of guys quit at that age. So there's guys playing wooden sticks, no face masks, that kind of thing, right? And like the stuff that you'd be in jail if you did most of the stuff back in those days. And I remember playing, like there was a biker guy on our team, and he'd ride with his equipment on his back and his little skull cap, and he'd come to the dressing room, and he was an electrician. He'd tape on his pads, pull out his big knife and cut it. Like this is like I was 17 playing it, right? So
animals.
I don't know why I kept playing, but I did. Anyway, I made it through. And again, as I kind of moved a little older, and then once I started getting to the Muay Thai, I'd fight a little bit. Well, then as you can imagine, I did pretty well as a fighter. I mean, I was not very technical in the early days. I was just kind of thick-headed. Obviously not scared of the puck, not scared of the ball. So I guess not scared of getting punched in went away. Yeah. So nobody wanted to do it.
Everyone heard how you were training.
It was a lot of that. It was there wasn't so much that anybody had, that I really pummeled anybody badly and everyone heard about it. And there's no like phones and videos of things like that, right? So it was a lot of rumor and innuendo. And my dad used to say that about Corey, like, because my youngest brother Corey, he's a pretty freaking tough dude. He's a big rig, right? And my dad would say that when Corey was working at the nightclubs, like, because Corey would say, "Oh, I got in a fight tonight," and Corey had a little shorter switch, and I think he likes that stuff, right? Whereas I'm the quieter, more the one you wouldn't think of to be like to twist off like that. But my dad was like, "So when you go up to Corey." Best player in the other team, dust him up, and then see if anybody wanted to stand up for him. And nobody did at some point. But I kept playing that till I was like 38. And then that was right around the time I was ending fighting. And I was trying to make a comeback right around 38 or 40. And all the kids were big on the team. I say kids now because they were, all I had to be was 22 to play on the team, and I'm 38. And they're running fast, like way fast. And I found my stick skills were competitive. I was good that way. But I went out there and I was in great shape, and I'm out there for the first practice, and I blow a hammy. I was like, shit, okay, hammy's down. And the guy on that team, they in my older age. But then, yeah, my two youngest daughters, I got them playing at 4 and 6. So they were, they went up to a field lacrosse, boys field lacrosse the first time. I remember the little one. So there's mostly boys there, and they got ponytails hanging out of their back of the helmets. And the one girl's my one daughter, Lizzie's wearing pink socks. And some boy says to her, how come you got girl socks on? She goes, well, because I'm a girl. Right? So they started at that age, and they kept playing. They kept playing all the way through. And so I kept coaching them. So I'd coach, they were just far enough apart that they had to be on two different teams most of the time. So girls lacrosse grew, like in Southwest Calgary, really grew. There was a few people, me, another guy, Craig McConaughey, is an ex-lacrosse guy. So we helped grow the number of girls playing, and it got to the point where, and girls will try a new sport anytime.
Yep.
So like at 16, Lizzie been playing for 12 years, and there's a new girl coming out and wants to play. So I would always pair her up with them so that she could help them have some success. But then when it comes time for the game, it's getting a little harder for the 16-year-old who's working on her behind the back pass, and the other girls learning how to pick up the ball. It's not fun for either of them.
Yep.
So we formed a new association in 2019 called Fury Lacrosse. So I was a founding member of that. So it's an all-female lacrosse association, same concept as Calgary girls hockey. So we put all the girls into a pool. It's at the time was to have a competitive division, a development division. So we had that for 1 year, and then of course we're hit by COVID. So we've kind of been rebuilding since then. So yeah, I was a founding member of that. I always get asked, do you want to be on the board of Alberta Lacrosse? I'm like, board stuff is, I can do it and I'm pretty good at it, but I like being on the floor coaching. So then I've been their only director of coaching for that program ever since then. And then way back when the kids first started, lacrosse is a short season. It's 2 months long. Yep. So I wanted the girls to get better. So I started with just the girls on my daughter's teams. I'm like, let's get some gym space. Glenmore or wherever, we'd get a gym and we'd play once a week during the off season. And then eventually all the girls in Southwest Calgary, all the girls teams were saying, well, can we come to your program? So then they would start coming. And then, one of them was like a ringette player who plays ringette with a girl in the Southeast. Well, can the Southeast girls come? And then eventually Fury came. So now I've been running that program for 12 years now.
Crazy.
Every Tuesday night, I have 2 hours of floor time full of girls. Like I've had 50, 60, 70 girls at a time. So much fun. Like no matter how crappy my day is in the oil patch, my wife's like, go coach lacrosse. And I'll see you when you get home. And I come home and you don't have time to think about what's the price of oil or, the guy who crashed the truck or anything, stuff like that. It's just focused on that, and it's so much fun. So yeah, I spend my time doing that. And so now I'm coaching a junior female team. So both my daughters were on the team last year. One's aging out of that team. And then I coached the team Alberta. And like I said, I forgot my ring today, which is a big Stanley Cup looking ring, which is awesome.
You might have to take a picture with it.
I'll send it to you for sure. And so we won that championship this year. So Alberta's never won a female box lacrosse gold medal. Team is 18 players and 2 goalies. Usually you have a few extras. We had 12 girls try out for the team. And Alberta Lacrosse was like, well, what are we going to do? That's not enough. I was like, don't worry, I got this. So I got on the phone. I started recruiting girls. We ended up going through our 3 redshirt players. We had some players fall out. So we even had more challenges beyond those 12 girls. And we went out there and, we made it. The girls bought in. Like there was they bought into the whole process. So we had an amazing coaching staff. So I had me, I had a colleague, Corey Redwood. So Corey's a ex-athlete, played, collegiate sports, not a lacrosse guy, but just great with the athletes. And then a guy I grew up playing lacrosse against, a guy named Blaine Rain, so Indigenous guy. Didn't really know Blaine when I brought him on the team. He played in the States and was in the Marine. Until you prove you're not. And, half the time I'd come down for the bus 5 minutes early. They'd be all on the bus already, tapping their watches, going, "Hey, coach, it's time to go."
What are we doing here?
It was just such a cool experience. They all just bought into everything. We play, this has made every role important. So if your job is D, you got to be the best. Defense wins championships. We talk about that. And if your job's winning faceoffs, you win the faceoffs. And if your job's putting the ball in the net, do that. And we're going to, we're going to celebrate everybody along the way. So it was a pretty awesome experience, and we're going back to do it again. Amazing. So I've signed up to be the coach again. I expect there won't be 12 girls trying out this time. There'll be those. Every other, there was a bunch of other nationals that same weekend, like boys, U17, girls. Almost all of them are BC and Ontario in the final. Like those were the hotbeds, and ours was not.
Amazing.
And then we beat them both on the same day. And Ontario had hundreds of girls try out for their team apparently. And we just had our 12 or so.
Crew.
Yeah, we had our crew, right? And it was awesome.
Crazy. How do you find the time and energy to pull all this off?
Good question. I don't know. Like lately, as I've gotten over 50, I don't sleep as well as I used to. So, but I never slept much anyway. But I always felt rested. So now I got some physical things that make me don't sleep as well. But I still seem to have a lot of energy, and that's a good question. I don't know. Like
do you think about this? Because
I don't. Everyone asks me, but I don't think about it. If it's got to be done, it's got to be done, right? And I the way you do anything is the way you do everything. So if I sign up to do something, I'm going to do it. It's that wholeheartedly.
It's that simple, though, right?
I feel like it is. Like
it's so.
Yeah, there's only do, right? So I try, like I said, when people say that, I'll try. I'm like, no, just decide to do it. Yep. And there's things I could decide, like I could probably lose 20 pounds, but I haven't decided to do that. I've done it, but sometimes, there's some of these things that you don't commit to as much. And I find that if there's other people involved, I commit. Yeah. And I commit to myself as well too. But I don't know why I have that energy for it. I mean, I think it gives me energy a lot of times, right? Even like, talked about the introvert extrovert thing. So being in front of a team is different than being in front of an individual. Like, they're all doing summer camps. They're all, working with a trainer. They're pretty comparable, give or take. Yeah.
Whereas not a good thing.
Yeah. Not a good thing necessarily. Right. Yeah. They're comparable more or less. Right. Whereas the girls, there's a lot of, some of them they were dancers, or they were, ringette players or
real
hockey
athletes.
players. Yeah. Right.
Multifaceted.
Yeah, exactly. Multi-sport athletes. Right. And then, because they've come into the game at different times, there's different adjustments. So I think I like the individual thing. I try to call them all by name, and we chit chat on the floor. Like I got one little girl, she's 7 years old, Michaela. Hey, Michaela, what's going on? How was school today? And she goes, I got in trouble. And I try to have those personal connections with them too. And then we get after it with the sport. Yeah. And because they all come from, everybody has a different background, but theirs is more noticeable, I guess. You can trying to remember who needs to work on what
Yeah.
and communicate with them in different ways. Like some are great on whiteboard, some are good when you walk through it, some are good on, need encouragement. Just trying to piece that all together. I look at that as a challenge, and I like that challenge. Like it stimulates my brain, not as well as my physical side of it being there, and bringing energy to the whole thing too. So I run out of gas, but I do seem to have a lot of energy. I don't know why.
but you don't have to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Just go.
It works for me. I don't know if it'll fizzle at some, it'll probably slow down at some point, but maybe it won't. We talk about, my wife and I talk about our life and retirement. Like I don't feel like I'm anywhere near retiring, certainly not financially anyway, but I don't know that I'll ever will. Like I always have to be doing something. Like I worry sometimes about my physical well-being. Like what happens when I can't stop pucks anymore? Yeah. Like I watched it was a goalie clinic thing. I thought about doing some goalie training to learn some of the new techniques. And they had a video of this guy and he's making saves and he's like, Bob's awesome. Be awesome like Bob. Bob's 75. And you can't tell he's under all his gear and he's playing out there. He's got the jazzy new gear, making saves. Like I hope I'm that guy that they got to drag off the ice. And I hope the same thing with coaching, as long as I keep up to date on coaching. There was a transition time in my coaching career. Yep. Like I coached boys way back when I was like 21, and I coached Corey when he was playing midget lacrosse, 21, and he was playing with, we played against Caleb Toth, who's the legendary Caleb Toth from Calgary. Yeah.
Played hockey
and hockey too, right? Yeah. Speaking of multi-sport athletes. So we coached against him, right? So the game has changed a ton, and I've got some really good support people in my life that kept me up to date on the modern lacrosse, right? And then now I'm even looking at new opportunities for lacrosse. So this year there's going to be a first ever women's box lacrosse world championships. So my two daughters went and tried out, and it was unbelievable, the level of play. Just unbelievable. Now, amazing. 35 players from Alberta went, and people asked, how did the Alberta girls do? And it was very much that. It was girls. Like there's a lot of women out there in BC and Ontario. And there's a handful of Calgary and Alberta girls that are in the running, and they should make it. There's some great athletes coming out of here. So hopefully some of them make it. Now I'll never get consideration to coach that team because I'm not in the Hall of Fame, and I didn't win the Man Cup, but I have been talking to some other countries. So I talked to Australia a little bit. I talked to Finland, US Virgin Islands. They don't have a team, but they said they might bring me down for a camp. So you never know. Box lacrosse is starting to grow. Like the girls who play field in the States are going, well, why can't we play with full contact? And so there's some development happening in that. So I'm a specialist in that field. So we'll see where it goes.
Amazing.
It's a fun thing to do.
So cool.
Yeah.
This has been really cool, man.
It's awesome. Yeah.
I wanted to have you on the show because the minute I launched this thing, you were super supportive, and I really appreciated that. And I knew that you had a story to tell. So it was like this, there's two reasons to get you on here. So
I hope it was an interesting story.
Well, it's awesome. It's you're involved in so many different things that, and the answer when I ask you the question of like, how do you do it? You're like, well, I'm throwing another one in the mix too. I'm watching a little video series about coaching. So it's connections between sports and business. Cool. So I did a first session here recently. So it's part of my social media marketing. So some of the social media stuff I've done was, nobody knew who Finley Inspection Services was because, we didn't have a website. Guys knew him, right? And that's how it was. So first little branch of it was getting to know the company and our history, because you can't build reputation overnight. Second part's been kind of about building why we're better or why we're different, because we do things differently. So why you want to use us and the value in that. And then another thing, so the same social media group that's helped me, they know that I have some interest in sort of business coaching. Like I talked about the piece that's missing from my career right now. So I want to start branching out and doing that. I've been kicking tires on it for a while. I've done a little bit of it sort of pro bono, and now I'm kind of ready to move into that more, like helping younger guys who, whatever, it's just like sports, like some guy who's new to leading a team. Or whatever it may be, solving problems within your company. So I'm launching that. So we came up with a little video series that we're doing. I shot the first batch, and it's called Game Changers. And it's about the connections between sports and business. So I had my first guest on last week, and the videos haven't come out yet, but he's an ex pro rugby player who's CEO of a company and doing really well. And I got an ex pro hockey player lined up he's worth the price of admission. Awesome. So we'll see where that goes too. So I'll keep throwing more things in my life. What the heck, right? Why not? You got the energy to do it.
Yeah.
And the show with one question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
I know. I thought about your question.
You've heard it.
I've heard it before, and it's tricky. Like there's so many things about Calgary. I mean, I've heard a few people say community, and that's one that comes to mind too. And I think, so I thought, I didn't want to say that again necessarily, but I think connections, like if you think about all these connections in Calgary, I've done that over all the years, when I would launch into a new sales position somewhere, I'm like, well, you never worked on a drilling rig. You don't know anything about drilling rigs, Rob. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm from Calgary. I'm 2 or 3 phone calls away from knowing who I need to know. And I think that way about everything, whether it's Muay Thai, the kickboxing, Muay Thai, the hockey connections, the lacrosse connections. Like it's all these different connections. And Calgary is this big, small town, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's a big city now, and I don't always love some of the direction it's going, with, things that are happening in the world, but it's still that small town feel. There's still people who want to connect.
Yep.
I do a lot of that, like, because I work alone a lot of the time. I need to make sure I do those connections. And whether it's, a guy who used to work for my dad 20 years ago, or a lacrosse player I haven't seen in 25 years, or a guy I played hockey with who I maybe in the past, I would just go and play hockey and then leave the rink afterwards. I'm like, why don't we go have coffee or beer or whatever later on and make that connection? So to me, Calgary is a really connected place. And I don't think people really realize it until you've been here and been a part of it and seen it. So
and put the effort to be a part of those communities, right?
You do have to put the effort, because I haven't always done that. There's parts, like I said, in the hockey world, I just kind of kept like, hey, go out and stop the puck and go home. And that was the fun part of it. I wanted to keep doing that, but now I'm like, I play hockey with some really awesome guys. I'm like, let's get to know guys away from the rink a little more. And it happens too in your life too. Like my kids are all grown. I've got a couple that are at home, but I don't have to drive them to sports and, things like that anymore. So your life changes and things like that. Things become more independent. And so I have more time for that type of thing as well.
For sure.
Like I said, I have an amazing supportive wife who lets me, we're sneaking up onto lacrosse season, and the running joke is that she's a lacrosse widow. Like she disappears, but she has her own interests and keeps busy and things like that. And I think that's the key to our awesome marriage and why we'll stay married forever. And then like she likes being kind of she sneaks into the lacrosse rinks incognito, and people don't know who she is because she doesn't hang around all the time. And she can hear when people talk crap about me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Not that happens too much, but hopefully not anyway. But and I hope, this was a great chat, and I hope that you and I can get together too sometime outside of here with a beer or whatever and chat more. Yeah, we can make that happen for sure.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. This was a pleasure and an honor. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man.